This month was kind of annoying. Since November, I had like one of the worst depressive episodes imaginable, which only very recently started to become more manageable. So sorry for the hold up. I got some cool stuff incoming. Anyways, today I'm going to be doing a scene by scene analysis / review of the Owl House episode thanks to them. So the episode begins with a mini flashback to the last 40 or so seconds of King's Tide, and we see the Hex Squad getting shoved back through the portal by King Sonic's shout powers. We then see Camilla and V in the kitchen, and on the iPad that's to the right of Camilla, there's an article about Anne Boonchoy from Amphibia, which I thought was a pretty cool little Easter egg, thus also confirming that Amphibia and the Owl House both take place in the same universe. Camilla then opens the front door, and to her surprise, she's greeted by Luce and the others. This is also the point at which the episode properly begins. Luce and Camilla are then finally reunited. They both embrace each other crying, and seeing that was honestly such a heartwarming moment. Like, Dana already got me feeling emotional. Gus, Willow and Amity then help Camilla out with some of the kitchen chores, and for a brief moment we see Amity acting a bit shy and nervous around Camilla, which is wholesome because it seems as if she doesn't want her girlfriend's mum to have a bad first impression of her. But Camilla, without even having to say anything, is able to provide Amity with some of that reassurance. So at this point I got the impression that Camilla had already picked up on Luce and Amity being a couple. We then see Luce and Hunter start having a small discussion about who they think the others would hate the most if they ever found out about both of their secrets. Luce helping Bellos meet the Collector, and Hunter being a Grimwalker. In the end, they decide that they're both going to tell everyone their secrets once they're ready to. Also, the three characters on the front of the Band-Aid box that Luce gets out of the cabinet look pretty similar to Ida, King and Hootie. Although what Luce and Hunter don't know is that Gus at the very least is aware of Hunter being a Grimwalker, since he read Bellos' mind in King's Tide, which is alluded to later on in the episode. And so I think Gus knowing about Bellos' past and what really happened to Caleb will play an important role in one of the upcoming 2 episodes. Everyone then updates Camilla on what happened back in the Demon Realm with Emperor Bellos and the Collector. She then reassures them all that they're safe with her, but then it cuts to outside and we see Goo Bellos bouncing away from the house. Gus and Hunter go down to the basement and start setting up their sleeping arrangements there, and of course Gus starts freaking out over all of the new human things that he finds, so pretty much leaving Hunter to do most of the setting up. In the background of the shot hanging up on the wall near the sewing machine is Lucy's dress from the first episode of season 1. It also still has a stain on it, so I'm guessing at some point Camilla is going to repair it and wash it, but just hasn't gotten around to doing so yet. Also, behind the counter that Gus climbs up onto, there's a framed photo of Camilla and Lucy's dad Manny on their wedding day. Hunter then gets on his knee and thanks Camilla for providing him and the others with somewhere to stay, which makes Camilla feel a bit uncomfortable because she then says,
"Please never do that again, and you can call me Camila."
Like, when you think about it, it's really sad that Hunter thinks that thanking people like that is normal, and also makes you wonder what awful things Bellos did and said in order to condition him to just automatically do stuff like that. Camilla then goes upstairs to check on the others, who have all set up their sleeping arrangements in Lucy's room. We then see V in the middle of explaining to Willow and Amity how alarm clocks in the human realm works. The alarm goes off and Willow and Amity both destroy it, misinterpreting the noise as being some sort of danger alert. And I mean, considering the prior events of King's Tide, it makes a lot of sense that they'd both be on high alert. When Camilla exits Lucy's room, to the left of the door frame there's a note written by V which says, "Welcome home, Luce, we missed you," which I thought was super wholesome. Camilla then finds Luce at the end of the corridor looking at one of the many photos that decorate it. Some of the photos on the wall include Luce's middle school graduation, Luce celebrating one of her birthdays, some family photos of Luce, Camilla and Manny, Luce marking her height on the wall, Camilla cannonballing into a swimming pool, Luce dressed up as a cat, Luce standing in front of an elephant, and that's just pointing out a few of the photos. Luce then starts apologizing to Camilla. She explains that she never meant to lie and that she had to stay, but Camilla, like the supportive mum she is, says to Luce that she's just happy she's home again. And then Luce is like, "Yeah, I'm home, but they're not," referring to the others now being the ones that are far from home. An opening montage that acts as both a time skip and theme song for the episode then plays out. We first see the Hex Squad enter the old abandoned house, possibly looking for clues on how to get back to the Demon Realm. We then see Luce showing Camilla a PowerPoint that she made in order to tell her that she and Amity are dating and that she's bi, which was honestly such an iconic moment. And of course Camilla was supportive about it. Flapjack is shown trying to find something under one of the floorboards in the abandoned house. The gang hang up drawings of their families back home in the Demon Realm in order to boost the mood a bit, and I love the fact that Amity just drew her dad and her siblings, deliberately leaving out Odalia because, as we all know, Odalia is trash. Okay, so I was just sitting here editing, and originally I was going to do a kind of Photoshop image of Adalia inside a trash bin, but I was trying to find a cutout of her character against like a transparent background, and I gave up because Google traumatized me. Look what came up. This. What the fuck is this? All I was looking up was the Owl House Adalia transparent background, and before I was able to look through them all, this popped up on my fucking Google Images. Like, what the hell is this? Okay, I'm done. Continue with the video. Everyone goes clothes shopping. Gus's outfit kind of gives me ski holiday vibes. Willow wears a tank top of Mabel's shooting star from Gravity Falls. The hat that Amity's wearing is a reference to Vivienne from Paper Mario, and Hunter's dressed up in a cardinal costume. V finds her own style, which was pretty cool to see, since before she was just wearing Lucy's clothes, and I liked how she was able to find a way to camouflage her ears by just making her hair the same two-toned colour as they are. She also now has yellow pupils. Next we see Hunter in the bathroom, and he's got a book about the witch hunters of Gravesfield. However, he then sees that his hair has grown a lot and is immediately reminded of Caleb and Bellos, so he then starts frantically trying to cut his own hair. Willow sees this and then comes in and cuts it for him. Now, I'm probably looking into this too much, but if you look at Willow and Hunter's hands when Willow starts cutting Hunter's hair, both of their left hands are making I love you in sign language. So Dana, is there something you want to tell us? Fast forward a bit and we see the Hex Squad trying to make a portal back to the demon realm. However, the portal ends up not working since they don't have any Titan blood. Gus swinging around that fire extinguisher was pretty funny. We then see Luce feeling guilty about the portal not working, and Amity comes over to comfort her. Also, the shirt that Hunter's wearing is a reference to Rocco from Rocco's Modern Life. The gang make this weird monster thing out of food for Camilla and Luce, who don't look too happy about it. We then get this super wholesome scene of Luce and Amity dancing in the rain together. Like, oh my fucking god, my heart can't take it anymore. Gus and Hunter fall over into a load of mud. Camilla gives Willow a Polaroid camera, which eventually becomes a bit of a hobby for her, as we see later on in the episode. Amity then creates a ball of light to help Luce mimic the series' main opening, which then transitions into Luce drawing a light glyph in her notebook. She tries to activate the glyph, but it doesn't work. Surrounding the glyph are doodles of King, Ida and Hootie, more of which she has stuck on the wall. There's a post-it note stuck on the bottom of her corkboard that says, "Love you, Luce," signed by Amity. The school bus arrives and Luce grabs both her backpack and her unhatched palisman egg. The camera then follows a trail of leaves blowing in the wind, and we then get the iconic Owl House logo. Also, the Albert emblem on the logo now has a bright orange glow to it. We meet back up with the gang except for Luce chilling inside the old house, and they've all been practicing Spanish on this bootleg Duolingo app, which is funny because Duolingo and the Owl House have interacted a few times before, even pushing the ship of Duolingo and Hootie. Willow's shirt has the Animal Crossing leaf on it, and Gus is wearing the magic amplifier that he took from Adrian Gray as an earring. During the lesson, Amity gets slightly annoyed and says,
I was the top student once.
Referencing back to when she was the top student at the beginning of the series, which despite being just a simple statement, in a way it sort of shows how far Amity has come in terms of character development, but at the same time shows that she's still gonna have moments where she goes back to old ways of thinking, so it makes her character development feel more believable. This whole time Flapjack has been just pecking at the ground, which is also what he's shown doing in the montage, and so the gang are all a bit perplexed as to why he keeps doing that. Camilla then drops by to let everyone know that she's gonna go pick up Luce from school, and she's feeling pretty overwhelmed by the fact that she has to take care of so many children. The others carry on with practicing their Spanish, but then Flapjack manages to find what he's been looking for, which is this old box that's been buried underneath the house. The box has a little bit of a puzzle on it, and since it was what Flapjack was looking for the entire time, the gang then realise that it must be some sort of puzzle to open the portal door. So they start freaking out about it, and we get Gus and Willow chanting portal door over and over again. They then decide that they're not going to tell Luce about it until they figured it out, since she already feels responsible for all of their previous failed attempts, and they think that she's taking on too much of a burden by herself, so they all want to do something nice for her in return. And speaking of Luce, we get to see her in school. She's sitting near the window looking pretty depressed. The topic of discussion in her class, as written on the chalkboard, is fate versus free will, the plight of the hero, which has been quite a big theme throughout the Owl House. And so Luce then starts comparing herself to the hero from the book that her class are discussing, by seeing herself in this fictional character, since the fictional character that she's comparing herself to may be a hero, however he's made mistakes, which if his family and friends found out about, then they'd hate him, and he'd be better off if he just never existed in the first place. Which is honestly so sad, because you can see that she's so visibly angry at herself and feels so much guilt and shame that it's to the point where she's heavily implied to be suicidal, since she's essentially saying that it would be better off if she never even existed in the first place. And what's worse is that some people were full on making fun of her for this scene. Two of the most frequent comments that I saw were, one, that they got second-hand embarrassment from her in that scene, and two, that she was really cringe and annoying in that scene. Like, what? Just from those reactions alone, it just goes to show how overlooked and dismissed her trauma gets compared to Hunter's, even though she's the main character. And don't get me wrong, I'm not at all saying that Hunter's trauma should get dismissed or anything like that at all, but like, just because Lucy's trauma when looked at on a surface sort of level seems like nothing compared to the trauma that Hunter's been through, it doesn't mean that her trauma is any less valid than his, or that we should just overlook and dismiss hers. Hunter and Lucy's trauma may be completely different, but that doesn't make either one less or more valid than the other. After that happens, she goes and visits her locker, which is filled with a bunch of boiling owl stuff. There's a few drawings of Ida and King, including one of young Ida with with her bright orange hair, 2 Polaroid photos from Grom stuck on the left side of her locker, a cutout of an article about Ida getting banned from a cafe for wreaking havoc, which first appeared in the season 2 episode Yesterday's Lie, and there's a sketch of the light glyph. 2 students then come up to talk to her, and not gonna lie, at first I got worried that they were gonna bully her, but thank God they didn't. They tell her that they agree with what she said in class, and they seem to have already picked up on the type of person that she is, as they then invite her to the Gravesfield Haunted Hayride event. Furthermore, those 2 students are actually based off of crew members Mike Austin and Bridget Underwood. So after that, Camilla picks Luce up from school, and she starts asking if the food she got for Luce's friends is okay, and if whether they'd prefer to drink blood. However, their conversation suddenly gets interrupted by the sight of a car accident. We then see the woman who was in the car accident explain to one of the officers that a deer just came out of nowhere, but her daughter is convinced that it was a monster that came out of nowhere. The camera then pans over to reveal the bones of a dead deer that has green goo dripping from its antlers, showing us that Belos has been possessing and feeding off of wildlife. And I feel like there's a small possibility that dear Belos saw a car for the first time and then just froze in the headlights out of pure confusion. The next scene shows Hunter in the middle of sewing together a t-shirt that has a picture of a pack of wolves on it. Darius was always saying that Hunter needed to take sewing lessons, and in this scene we find out that Camilla taught him how to sew using the sewing machine. However, Hunter's not quite a pro at sewing just yet, since he ends up cutting his finger a couple of times on the sewing machine, so Gus ends up putting a little bandage over it, and Hunter shows him the t-shirt that he's sewn together and explains to him what wolves are, which he's in awe of. So it was really nice to see Hunter finally happy and being more himself. Also, the t-shirt that he sews together has 7 wolves on it, and there are 7 of them living together like a family in the Noseda household, so maybe Hunter sees the others sort of like his wolf pack in a way, as it's kind of similar to a found family. And so after that, Hunter and Gus then have a bit of a heart-to-heart, which is prompted by Gus pointing out that Hunter has been smiling a lot more during their time spent in the human realm, which at first Hunter tries to deny, but then Gus reassures him that him being happier is a good thing. Hunter's reaction to Gus pointing that out just goes to show how awfully oppressive and abusive Belos was to him, since at first he automatically saw Gus pointing that out as a bad thing, which leads me to believe that Belos most likely punished Hunter any time he showed any emotions that Belos didn't like, as he was always telling Hunter who to be, conditioning him 24/7. Gus then asks Hunter what he did in the Emperor's Coven, and Hunter explains that he would mostly just train and study, wasn't really allowed to be around any of the other scouts, but he enjoyed weekends as he'd get to leave the castle to go on missions. So Gus asks, do you miss any of that? And Hunter says that he misses knowing who he's supposed to be. That line honestly hit close to home for me, and I really felt for him here. Hunter goes on to say that they'll find a way back, which then reminds Gus of the Cosmic Frontier novel that he's been reading. Cosmic Frontier being a parody of the franchises Star Trek and Star Wars, but mainly being a parody of Star Trek. There's a character in the novel who's a clone that goes by the name Chief Engineer O'Bailey, which Hunter immediately starts relating to. Gus then opens a closet that's full of Manny's and presumably Camilla's collectibles and cosplay stuff. The next scene shows Luce lying in her bed looking up at these glow-in-the-dark stars that she's stuck on the underneath of the bed above her, since she has a bunk bed. The stars that she's looking up at also have a lot of visual similarity to the Collector, and since she can't sleep, she decides to get up and take her palisman egg with her to her mum's room. On the way out, she unknowingly wakes up Amity, who then finds Luce's invite to the haunted hayride. We then get this really interesting and insightful scene with Camilla that tells us more about her and shows us more of her perspective on things. So first of all, she's sitting in bed writing down lots of notes on all the kids' favourite things, what they like and what they dislike, which that on its own just shows what a supportive and caring mum she is, and you can see just how many different things she's keeping track of and doing research about. She has a book on vampire diets, a book on Halloween treats, and a book on gender identity. Camilla then dozes off and has a dream about a few past events involving both her and Luce. The dream starts off with Luce as a little kid playing at a playground. She finds this garter snake skin that's been buried under the soil and goes to show it to the other kids, telling them that the snake has shed its skin, or as she says, its pajamas. The kids start freaking out, telling her how gross it is, and then run away from her. Camilla, who's watching from nearby, thought that it was cute. She's like, ah, she called it pajamas, but the other parents are like, ew, that's really unhygienic, and say that Luce was probably raised by wolves. So Camilla goes to stand up for herself, saying that wolves are great parents, but before she can say anything else, it fades to another memory. We see the school play from the very first episode, however this time it's from Camilla's perspective. When Luce does that thing pretending to have her guts spill out, Camilla, who's watching from the audience, finds it funny and is like, ah, her dad taught her that trick. But just like in the last memory, the other parents start being really disapproving of Luce and making fun of her again. Camilla then goes to stand up for her daughter, but before she is probably able to, it fades to another memory again. We then see Camilla meeting one-on-one with the principal of Luce's school. The principal says to Camilla that Luce's grief has been making her deliberately act out for attention, and just like in the last two memories, Camilla defends Luce again, this time saying that losing Manny was difficult for the both of them and that Luce has always done things differently. Now what the principal said next low-key really pissed me off. He then says to Camilla, weren't you bullied in high school? And I was thinking, why would he bring that up with the parent of one of his students? Like, bro, your job is to run the school and help students with their education, not lay into their parents and use use the things they've told you against them in order to get the result that you want. So Camilla, rightfully so, is a bit taken aback by the principal bringing this up. We then see water start to pool around her feet, possibly symbolizing some very strong emotions that Camilla has about both her past and about the principal, which she's kept suppressed for a long time. However, from this conversation that she's having with the principal, those emotions are starting to surface again. The principal then goes on to say that Luce has no friends, her grades are inconsistent, and brings up the live snake incident. He then passes Camilla the leaflet for reality check summer camp and tells her that it could help her daughter. At this point, water comes crashing down around her, but instead of coming up through the floor, it comes down from the ceiling, possibly symbolizing the pressure she's feeling from the other adults around her. But when looking more at the visual imagery of this scene, we see Camilla's suppressed emotions rise slowly from the ground upwards, like she was slowly building up the courage to finally speak her mind to the principal and take all of those suppressed emotions out on him in that moment. But before she's able to, the principal interrupts her, giving her that leaflet, and so once again she's suddenly reminded of all the pressure that's been put upon her from the other adults around her. So the weight from all of that pressure comes pouring in from above, thus suppressing down Camilla's true emotions once again, and so she feels like she's drowning as we see the room completely fill up with water as the principal manipulatively says, "You don't want Luce to struggle like you did, right?" She's then awoken by Luce, who comes into her room with her palisman egg. Luce then asks, "Mum, why aren't you mad at me?" Camilla kindly responds by beckoning Luce to come over to her and says that she was terrified. However, she understands what it feels like to want to run away from everything. So I thought it was really nice that she was able to relate to Luce, especially after getting to see more of her perspective on things. She then goes on to reassure Luce, saying that everything's okay now that she's back home, and so Luce then starts pouring her heart out to Camilla, saying that it's all her fault that her friends are trapped in the human realm. She doesn't know whether King and Ida are okay, and that she really wanted her mum to meet them both. It honestly made me so sad to see her like this. Camilla reassures her more and says that everyone makes mistakes, but what matters most is that you learn from them. So for comfort, she sleeps next to Camilla for the night. Also, it looks as if Camilla's framed that garter snake skin that Luce found. It then pans outside and we see a trail of animal bones that lead to Belos possessing another carcass, which leads me to theorize, will Belos be able to possess the body of the Titan? In the next scene, we meet back up with the rest of the gang who are planning to go into town in order to try and solve the mini puzzle thing that they found earlier on. Hunter then appears dressed as Chief Engineer O'Bailey from Cosmic Frontier, which was pretty funny as Amity and V are just like, what the heck? And then Willow and Gus are like, you look cool. Gus then asks Hunter if he's gotten to the last chapter of Cosmic Frontier, and Hunter explains that O'Bailey is still hiding the fact that he's a duplicate in hyper disguise. However, a character called Captain Avery is starting to figure it out, and then Gus is just like, I think he already knows, but before he's able to elaborate, Hunter cuts him off in fear of spoilers. That small interaction between Gus and Hunter definitely felt like a sort of parallel between them and the two characters from Cosmic Frontier, Hunter being like O'Bailey since he's hiding the fact that he's a Grimwalker from everyone, and Gus being like Captain Avery, but instead of starting to figure out that Hunter is a Grimwalker, he most likely already knows because in King's Tide he peered into Belos's mind, however is waiting for Hunter to tell everyone when he's ready to, rather than putting him on the spot. The others get a head start into town whilst Hunter stays behind to change outfit. He then takes a moment to reflect and expresses that even though he's not who he's supposed to be, he likes who he currently is, which was so wholesome to see as it shows how far he's come and that he's slowly starting to heal, since for the past few months he's been surrounded by supportive and caring people who actually value him as a person and see him as an individual. This wholesome moment doesn't last for long though, as Flapjack then notices a bit of green goo wiggling around on the floor. Hunter crouches down to take a closer look at it, and whilst he's doing that, Belos can be seen in the mirror spying on him from the doorway behind. When I saw Belos in the background, my heart just sank. Like, why can't Hunter ever just catch a break and just get to be happy without something bad happening to him? We'll be right back, or whatever. Ever wondered where you can get good quality Owl House merch from? If so, then you may be interested in Studio Badegg, formerly known as Homeworld Gallery, which was a shop that sold some pretty cool merchandise for various different shows, and is where I got these awesome Owl House pins from. Pretty cool, huh? Right now, they are currently in the middle of doing another round of pre-orders for these pins, but instead of selling the originals like the ones I've got, they're selling holographic edition ones, alongside some other cool Owl House stuff. So if you're interested, then you can keep up to date with them at Studio Badegg on Instagram, link to their shop and Instagram in the description. So it then cuts to the others who have just arrived at a magic shop called the Magic Circle. They go into the shop and start looking around for clues to help them solve the puzzle, but then end up getting kicked out after causing a bit of trouble. They then pass by the statues of the Witterbane brothers. Willow and Gus both stop to take a closer look, however don't recognise who the statues are of. They then go to the library to search for clues and once again end up not finding anything. However, there's then this really funny scene of Amity where she tries to get these mini filing cabinets to open up on their own, like the ones back in the Demon Realm do. Watch Lost in Language for more context. This kid kid then comes along and opens one of the cabinets without a second thought. Amity gets really freaked out by this, drops the piece of candy that she was trying to offer to the cabinets. Her face turns bright red out of embarrassment. She then tries to run away, but ends up tripping over the piece of candy she dropped. Like, she literally just face plants into the ground. They then go to the zoo and go to look at a giraffe, since giraffes were completely banished from the boiling isles. At first it seems normal, but then when Willow takes a photo of it, it morphs into this really horrible creature. They sit and take a small food break after running away from the weird giraffe, and Gus is like, I can see why our ancestors decided to banish them. Then after having a moment where everyone misses their dads, after they all see a dad and his kids walk by, because they had no luck finding any clues after exploring all of those different places, V eventually says, I was hoping it wouldn't come to this, but I think I know where to go next, and then leads them to the Gravesfield Historical Society, where Jacob Hopkins used to work. Willow already knows about the incident with Jacob, as she says to V, you can wait outside if it's too scary, and that she knows what happened with Jacob since Luce told her about it. But V's like, nah, it's fine, we just faced down a giraffe, so I feel confident enough to go with you guys. She then kicks open the door expecting to see Jacob, but instead of seeing Jacob, she sees this character called Marcia, who's the person that told her fortune in the episode Yesterday's Lie. Marcia's nails are painted in the colour of the non-binary flag. They have a name tag on their desk that also says what pronouns they use, and they're the third character to be confirmed as non-binary in the show, which I thought was really cool. V then asks what happened to Jacob, and Marcia explains that Jacob was fired after he made edits to the exhibits, and then it shows this really dumb edit Jacob made, where he calls himself a local hero. Marcia then starts to recognise V and asks whether they've met before, and V's like, nope, I just have one of those faces, and then they're like, oh, what a coincidence, me too, but if you ever need a tour guide, hit me up. Then V starts blushing, so it seems that she has a bit of a crush on Marcia. Amity then shows Marcia the little puzzle and asks if they know how to decode it. Turns out they do. The gang learns that it's called a rebus, which is a type of puzzle that uses combinations of pictures and individual letters to represent words. For example, they take a look at the symbol that has an H next to a picture of an ear and learn that it means here, since the H is before the ear, so it becomes here. However, the here could either mean here as in listen, or it could mean here as in a place. So they start looking around the museum and then start trying to decode the other symbols, which is a picture of a ribbon that's been tied, a picture of a tanned hide, and a picture of a hand that has blood coming off of it, which all put together means Titan's blood, as the tied ribbon aka tie, the tanned hide aka tan, and then the blood which makes it Titan's blood. And when they realise this, they all suddenly shout out Titan's blood in sync, and V's like, it's like you're all reading each other's mind, you must have been friends forever. And then Amity says, well, it hasn't always been this way. But then Willow says, well, these past few months have been kind of weird, but we've made a lot of fun memories, and then shows them this scrapbook that she's been working on, which has all these pictures of some of their best memories together. There's a picture of them having a movie night where they're watching Hocus Pocus, some silly photo booth pictures, Luce and Amity jumping off a pier during sunset. Looks as if Luce convinced them all to go whitewater rafting, since she's the only one that looks like they're enjoying it. Hunter and Flapjack getting chased by a swarm of bees. Then on the next 2 pages, there's a picture of them looking at fireflies, and on the bottom of the picture, Willow's written, in the human realm, fireflies don't actually catch fire. Then there's a picture of V and Camilla making empanadas, V trying to put a leaf inside Willow's mouth while she's sleeping, Luce and Amity on a date, so at least they got that mundane slice of life date that they wanted. Then there's a photo of Luce teaching Amity how to draw glyphs, and then on the last 2 pages of the scrapbook, there are some snapshots of Gus, Amity and Hunter, and a group selfie of them all together that has Our Summer written on the bottom. So after looking through the scrapbook, V suggests that they take another picture together, so they start posing for it, and then after Willow's camera produces the Polaroid photo, V notices that there's a map in the background of their photo that looks very similar to the map that's on the rebus, and she's like, hey, do you think this map leads to the Titan's blood? Which is good, because it means that if they manage to find the Titan's blood, then they can use it to make a portal back to the demon realm. Amity's like, I can't wait to tell Luce about this, and I know just how to tell her, and then pulls out the flower for the haunted hayride that Luce dropped earlier on. We then meet up with Luce, who's at her mum's vet clinic waiting for her to finish work, and she's trying to figure out what her palisman is going to be once it hatches. Then once she starts packing up her things to go home, she notices the light glyph drawing which she's had her hand resting on has a bit of smoke coming off of it, and she's like, well, that's weird. It then cuts back to Hunter and Flapjack, who are back at Camilla's house, and Hunter's extremely anxious. He then puts Flapjack in this cage and says to him, if Bellos is really here, I'll keep you safe. So Hunter goes outside to talk to Luce and tells her that Bellos is back and that he needs her help, and so they end up going back to the abandoned house, as it was where Hunter last saw Bellos. Luce suggests that they wait for the others, but Hunter's like, no, we have to take care of this ourselves. But then is like, I wish I wasn't so scared. I was never scared as the Golden Guard. These 2 masks that look a bit like King and Hootie's faces then slowly blow onto the path that they're standing on, and so Luce then suggests that they both wear masks in order to feel more confident and to bring some of that Golden Guard vibe back. So with the masks on, they bust through the door of the abandoned house, both holding their makeshift weapons, Hunter holding a rake and Luce holding the red baseball bat that's originally from her beta design, but just without the glyph stuck on it. At first they don't see Bellos right away, however they then spot this shadow that's behind the door frame to the hallway move out of sight, so they immediately go into the hallway to see what it was, but end up finding nothing, so they then go and check some of the other rooms. They then suddenly hear a sound coming from from this door that's been covered up with wallpaper. They tear away the wallpaper and open the mysterious door and find a staircase that leads down to the basement. The suspense also really starts to build here. And so when they get to the bottom of the staircase, Luce switches on the basement light, and then her and Hunter's attention gets caught by a noise coming from this old rickety wardrobe that's also slightly shaking around. They slowly approach it with their weapons raised, expecting to see Bellos, but when they open it, they just find a possum. Like, what? So after they realise that it was just a false alarm, we then get one of the most heartfelt scenes of the episode. Hunter's like, yeah, I guess it really was just all in my head, because when he told Luce outside of her house, she just said, you're probably just being like paranoid. And so then Luce is like, well, I don't blame you for being paranoid, especially after everything we've been through. And Hunter then says, well, I just want to make sure that everyone's safe. Luce agrees with him and is like, yeah, I want to keep everybody safe too, and that also includes you too, Hunter. She then gives him a friendly punch on the arm, and Hunter's like, what? And she's like, well, yeah, I'm gonna make sure you're safe as well, Hunter. You're family now. And after she says that, Hunter just breaks down in tears crying because he's never had a family before. And Luce saying that to him so nonchalantly, like you can just tell that she really meant what she said to him, and it was pretty much all the confirmation he needed to finally feel fully accepted for who he is and to finally feel like he belongs somewhere. Like, this scene was honestly so moving and thought-provoking. Definitely one of my favourite scenes from the episode. So after that, Hunter says, this mask is pretty gross now, and they both laugh it off and start heading towards the stairs. And then Hunter's like, guess everything's okay now. Bellos is gone. But as he says that, this eerie music starts playing, and it then pans down the staircase to reveal some foreshadowing using Hunter's shadow. They get back to Luce's house and find everyone designing their costumes for the haunted hayride. Gus tells Hunter that he's gonna dress up as Captain Avery from Cosmic Frontier, and then suggests that Hunter dresses up as Chief Engineer O'Bailey, to which Hunter starts geeking out about. And then Camilla's like, what? How do you know about Cosmic Frontier? And Hunter's like, oh, well, we found the Cosmic Frontier books in your basement, since Gus showed Hunter that closet full of collectibles and cosplay stuff when he was telling him about Cosmic Frontier. So then Camilla starts trying not to freak out and is like, funny how things just show up in basements without you hiding or putting them there. From Camilla's sudden reaction to Gus and Hunter finding the Cosmic Frontier stuff, it kind of makes me think that the reason she was bullied was because she was quite nerdy. So she was likely bullied for liking Cosmic Frontier and for also being into sci-fi fantasy stuff. And so as a result of that, she then may have started suppressing that side of herself. But then when she met Manny and got to know him, he may have helped her to embrace being into Cosmic Frontier and sci-fi fantasy stuff. And so when Manny passed away, those bad memories of being treated as an outcast and the fear of rejection for her and eventually Luce caused her to hide all of the Cosmic Frontier stuff in the basement closet. So when Gus and Hunter found it all, she acted like she knew nothing about it, as it probably reminded her of the time she was bullied for liking it, and probably also brought back memories of her husband. But as silly as that scene is, the thought of Camilla still being embarrassed of her interest even now is really sad, and just shows how the effects of bullying can stay on for years. Amity then suggests to Luce that they both go as Azura and Hecate from the Good Witch Azura, and then says to Luce, I could be the Hecate to your Azura, to which Luce responds, oh wow, yeah, let's do it. However, it did look like she was forcing herself to sound more enthusiastic and happier than she actually is for Amity's sake, since Amity has probably been quite worried about Luce over these past few months, and so Luce probably doesn't want to make Amity even more worried and burden her with the stuff that she's been going through. Then when Luce goes to hug Amity, she suddenly starts resonating with a scene from a Good Witch Azura movie that's been playing in the background. Azura is going up against this character called Lucy, and then angrily says, how could you do it, villainous Lucy? How could you betray your friends? Lucy then says, it was for the greater good, to which Azura responds, we'll never forgive you. And as this scene in the movie plays out, Lucy's guilt and want to keep what she did a secret gets further reinforced. That scene in the movie tells us more about what Luce honestly and currently thinks of herself. She sees herself as a villain, a betrayer, and because of that, she thinks that her friends should hate her for what she did. However, deep down, she doesn't really think that her friends would all hate her for it, but she currently hates herself for what she did, so she's pretty much projecting that onto them by believing that they should all hate her for what she did. Hunter's mindset is also sort of similar to Luce's in this episode, in terms of the projection that revolves around their secrets. He doesn't really think that everyone would turn on him if they knew that he was a Grimwalker. However, like he said to Gus earlier, I miss knowing who I'm supposed to be, so he doesn't know who he is at the moment, and so because of that, he's projecting that the others will suddenly start treating him like a stranger, as that is how he feels to himself. So I think having these more nuanced details are what made both Luce and Hunter's mindsets feel pretty realistic throughout this episode, and also makes what would usually be another cliche miscommunication trope feel more real, by adding more layers that are nuanced to the characters' mindsets. In the next scene, Luce is once again lying awake and looking up at the glow-in-the-dark stars above her bed. She then gets up and takes her laptop into the kitchen and sits down to record a video diary entry. Her desktop wallpaper is a picture that she drew of her and Amity stargazing together, sitting on the roof of the owl house, which I thought was really adorable, and at the bottom of the screen you can see that her @ is Friends of Owls and Titans, and she's also put original art, do not repost, and on her desktop there are quite a few different references, such as Moon Farm Valley, a parody of Stardew Valley, Hollow Knight, a parody of Hollow Knight, Hades, which is just the game itself, there's a Good Witch Azura fanfic document, and there's also You Movie, which is a parody of iMovie, iMovie, which is probably what Luce uses to edit her AMVs. She then starts venting and says that all she ever wanted was to be good at something and to be around other people that also like that something. So when she found the demon realm, she thought that she could learn magic and that she could become a witch. She wouldn't be the dummy in the principal's office anymore. She then goes on to say that she messed up too much and that she put everyone in danger. Then recalling what her mum said to her earlier, she then says that she has to learn from her mistakes and that she now knows what she has to do. It then cuts to the next day and we see that it's now Halloween since everything is all decked out in Halloween themed stuff. Camilla drops everyone off except for V at the old Gravesfield Halloween festival, and we now finally get to see everyone's Halloween costumes. Hunter and Gus are both dressed up as those characters from Cosmic Frontier. Hunter is Chief Engineer O'Bailey and Gus as Captain Avery. Willow is dressed up as some sort of vampire bat type creature, and then Luce and Amity are dressed up as Azura and Hecate from that Good Witch Azura movie that they were watching from earlier on. Then while Luce is talking to her mum about trick-or-treaters, Amity takes the opportunity to tell the others what the plan is in terms of when to tell Luce about the rebus, and her plan is to wait up until the time is right to tell Luce about it. But while she's in the middle of explaining her plan to everyone, Hunter suddenly hears this creepy laughter coming from the direction of the woods. He turns to Flapjack, who's perched on his shoulder, and asks him, "Did you hear that?" To which Flapjack just shakes his head, so Hunter then just brushes it off as him just imagining things. But of course it wasn't him just imagining things. As he turns around, this horrible green stuff can be seen creeping its way up his neck, and when I saw this I started freaking out. Amity then reassures Luce that they're gonna have a great evening and that they may also have a surprise for her, to which Luce sadly says, "Yeah, me too," referring back to when she said, "I know what I have to do now," when she was recording that video diary. The gang then goes to this historical reenactment of a witch trial, and in the middle of the performance Gus runs onto the stage and is like, the witch who's on this trial isn't evil, but the person who's prosecuting her is the actual evil one. And then to back up his point, he casts an illusion spell which makes it look like the person that's prosecuting the witch has got goat's legs and a devil's tail. But then all of a sudden Jacob appears. He then goes up on stage and starts freaking out, and then proceeds to try and expose Gus by ripping off the headset that he's wearing and starts spewing all this stuff about Gus being from Mars and how it's the children that are evil and that they're just demon spawn that want your teeth. Luckily the police quickly come and take care of him, so thank God he's dealt with right away. They then all make their way to the haunted hayride where they meet up with Marsha again, who then starts telling them the tale of the brothers Witterbane. In the year 1613, Philip and Caleb arrived in Gravesfield as orphans, Caleb being the elder of the two. They then became witch hunters. Later on they met a witch from another world called Evelyn. Caleb then ended up being whisked away to this other world, and he and Evelyn started using a secret code in order to be able to travel between the two worlds. Meanwhile, Philip set off to save his brother and bring Evelyn to justice, or in other words,
sounds like Big Bro got a hot witch girlfriend and Little Bro got upset. But that's just me.
Also, I think that Evelyn may be a distant relative of the Clawthorns, since the names Edalyn and Gwendolyn both have the letters Lyn on the end of them, just like the name Evelyn does. And I think Flapjack may have been carved by Evelyn and then given as a gift to Caleb. So all of the Clawthorns having birds as their talisman may have been a tradition started by Caleb and Evelyn, which ended up lasting for generations and generations, all the way down to Lilith and Ida. So once they get off the hayride, Hunter hears that creepy laughter coming from the direction of the woods again, but this time when he looks, he sees Belos's silhouette peeking out from behind a bush. He starts freaking out and pulls Luce aside and explains that he definitely saw Belos this time and that he wasn't imagining things after all, to which Luce is like, well, how can you be so sure? What would he even be doing here? So Hunter ends up having to tell her about the surprise that they had planned for her. Luce then suggests that they go and find the Titan's blood before any of the others do, as she doesn't want to freak them out about the possibility of Belos being nearby. Hunter tells Flapjack to go and get the rebus from Amity, since she's the one that has it. However, Flapjack sort of hesitates as if he knows that something's not right. Hunter asks Flapjack for the second time, but this time this happens.
I'll say that again. Get the rebus.
As soon as this happened, I instantly knew that it was Belos messing with Hunter's head, because when he said it, his voice kind of went a bit distorted and his eyes glowed blue for a second, very similar to the glowing blue eyes of Belos's weird animal hybrid form that's been following them around throughout the entire episode. Luce notices Hunter's sudden change in attitude, so calls him out for it, to which Hunter's like, I don't know what came over me, further indicating that whatever just happened to him was something to do with Belos. Flapjack successfully retrieves the rebus without Amity noticing, and then Luce and Hunter start making their way into the woods. Now, the scene that plays after this one is actually another one of my favourite scenes from the episode. So we catch back up with Camilla and V, and we see that V's fallen asleep on the couch and has left the TV on. So Camilla comes in and turns the TV off. She then goes to pick up Luce's laptop that's just been left on the floor, but as she goes to put it away, she almost trips over Luce's red baseball bat. The laptop flips open and one of Luce's old video diaries starts playing. After realising what's playing, Camilla decides to watch it. In the video diary, Luce is a few years younger, and she starts talking a little bit about what it's been like for her moving house, and explains that her mum said they moved moved because their old house wasn't pretty enough. However, she knows the real reason they moved is because there's a better hospital nearby for her dad, and then goes on to say that their new house isn't much prettier. Another video diary starts playing. This time Luce is really sad and looks exhausted. She goes on to say, I think this might be the worst week ever, and so it's not that hard to guess what happens. You can also see the black dress that she wore to her dad's funeral hanging up in her closet. She then says, but dad left me this book, and holds up a copy of The Good Witch Azura. At this point, Camilla starts reaching out towards the screen, and this was also the moment where I started to get a little bit teary. So then the third video diary shows Luce geeking out about the book her dad gave her, and she's like, oh my gosh, I loved it so much. She starts jumping up and down, it's honestly so wholesome. You can also see that she's already hung up a Good Witch Azura poster, and hung up some drawings of Azura as well. And then in the fourth video diary, Luce shows off a sword that she got at a convention, but then at the end she's like, oh, I'm gonna cut my hair with it. She also has some more posters hanging up. Her Spirit Devourer poster is a reference to the anime and manga series Soul Eater. The fifth video diary shows the aftermath of Luce's idea to cut her hair, which was pretty funny. She's like, oh my gosh, that was such a bad idea. And then it shows Camilla just smiling fondly at the video. Now the sixth video diary is kind of like a prequel to the first episode of season 1. Luce is now wearing her signature outfit. Her room also now has a few more posters in it. Her Domicile Sinister 4 poster is a reference to Resident Evil 4. She's also hung up a drawing of what looks like Cloud Strife from Final Fantasy VII. She starts off by saying, Mum saw my report card, and then starts doing an imitation of Camilla saying to her, Mija, if you just applied yourself. And she then says, but I am applying myself, and starts listing a few of the things that she's taught herself, like being able to do tiny baseball stitches that are hardly visible, being able to read and write 5 different dialects of witch tongue, being able to sit so still to the point where woodland creatures will crawl onto her, and then this tiny spider comes and lands on her as she demonstrates her ability to sit super still. And she says, but I guess none of this is going to matter on the SATs, at which point I actually started to get teary again, because as someone who's neurodivergent myself, this scene just resonated with me so much, as I struggled with the same sort of issues that Luce mentions in this particular entry. She then goes on to say,
it's been really rough for Mom since the funeral, so I'm gonna wow my teacher's face off with this book report. Mom, you won't have to worry about me ever again.
I thought that was such a lovely thing to want to do for her mum, because up until this moment we were sort of led to believe that she just tactlessly did that book report, but all along she made it grand in the hopes that it would wow her teachers and that it would stand out more than the other students' book reports, so that then she'd get a good grade for it, and then her mum would see that and then be like, wow, I don't need to worry so much about my daughter anymore, since she's gotten a more positive report card this time. But then despite her efforts and wanting to do it for her mum's sake, she ended up getting in trouble with the principal and making her mum worry even more about her, so it basically had the opposite effect of what she intended, which is sort of heartbreaking when you really think about it. And throughout all of the video diary entries, this melancholic version of the show's ending theme song plays in the background, which I really liked, so I actually tried to find a full version of it, but surprisingly wasn't able to find anything, so now I'm hoping that a full version of it will be released sometime in the future. It then cuts back to Camilla, who goes to close the laptop, but before she's able to, the video diary that Luce recorded the previous night suddenly starts playing, and we finally get to find out what Luce is planning to do. On Halloween after the hayride, she's going to tell everyone that she's going to stay in the human realm permanently, because she feels that whenever she gets involved with anything, she just ends up messing everything up for other people. So in her mind, staying back in the human realm means that she won't be able to further mess things up for others, because ever since the incident with Belos and the light glyph, she's genuinely convinced that she's responsible for everything that's gone wrong ever since then, which is just awful. I really hope that she's able to find some sort of inner peace by the end of the series, and I don't mean in a everything's now all just sunshine and rainbow sort of way, but in a more, yeah, things have been shitty and I'll still have bad days, but I'm now at a place where I'm able to start working towards healing sort of way. That way her character development wouldn't become unrealistic. It then cuts back to Camilla again, who now suddenly has a serious and determined look on her face. We then catch up with Luce and Hunter, who are now running through the woods, but then all of a sudden Hunter starts feeling this sharp pain in his finger, so then stops and takes a look at it. We then see that the pain is coming from the finger that he injured when he was using Camilla's sewing machine. He pulls back the band-aid and we see this horrible green goo come out of his cut. So Belos used Hunter's cut to enter into his bloodstream and then possess him. Belos is just disgusting. Hunter's eyes glowed up blue colour again, and he then sees the silhouette of Monster Belos in the distance staring right at him. He shouts and then sprints in the direction of where he saw Belos. Luce goes chasing after him, but ends up losing him in the fog. At first she starts freaking out, but is soon able to calm herself down and start thinking things through. She then suddenly has an epiphany, and it flashes back to when the glyph she drew at her mum's vet clinic tried to activate itself. Glyphs don't work on Earth without any Titan's blood, so if that glyph tried to activate itself earlier, then it must have meant that there was some Titan's blood somewhere nearby. She goes to activate one of her her glyphs again, and this time it worked. She says, the closer I am to the Titan's blood, the stronger the glyphs become. And so she then starts using the glyphs as a guide to help her find the Titan's blood. We then meet back up with Gus, Willow and Amity, who are all wondering where Luce and Hunter are. Gus reassures the other two by saying that they probably went off to buy some more things, but then V and Camilla suddenly show up. And Camilla's like, have any of you seen Luce? And has she said anything weird? V then goes onto the Find a Phone app and is able to use it to track Luce's phone. It then cuts back to Luce, who's now at the outskirts of Gravesfield Graveyard. However, in order for her to get to the center of the graveyard, she has to cross over this swamp-like lake area, so she uses an ice glyph to create a walkway across the lake. When she gets to the center of the graveyard, she finds Hunter standing in front of a gravestone, and we see that the rebus has been ripped up and discarded behind him. Immediately, I knew that something wasn't right, and that this was definitely something to do with Belos. Like the way he replied to Luce after she asked him, are you okay? Did you see Belos?
Oh, no. Just my imagination playing tricks again.
You just instantly know that that's not Hunter talking as himself, because the way he says, oh no, just my imagination playing tricks again, is in that really cold, condescending tone that Belos often uses. And there's also a very subtle sort of rise in Hunter's voice as he says this, because obviously Belos is controlling what Hunter says here, so he's using Hunter's voice to talk. Hunter also suddenly starts talking a little bit slower than he normally does, which is also another trait of how Belos talks, so you can just tell this isn't Hunter talking as himself. But like, can we just take a moment to appreciate what an amazing voice actor Zeno Robinson is? Like, seriously. Hunter then says, why don't you find the Titan's blood while I find my palisman? So Luce then goes looking around the area trying to find the Titan's blood, and while she's looking for it, she goes,
All this Belos talk has me on edge. But I hate to ruin Amity's surprise. I really appreciate that everyone wanted to do this. You guys are great friends.
It then cuts back to Hunter, who now has his back turned to the camera, and you can see that horrible green stuff creeping up his neck again. However, it's also starting to creep up the back of his head, and that green goo that came out of his cut earlier on has now made the finger that it's on completely green. Then while shakily clutching his hand, Hunter goes, have you found the blood yet? And Luce is like, yeah, I'm on it, just have to. She stops mid-sentence as she suddenly hears this chirping coming from behind the gravestone that she's standing next to. She looks behind it and finds Flapjack quivering in fear, and she says to Flapjack, why do you look so scared? Hunter suddenly appears behind her, his top half in complete shadow, except for the creepy blue glowing Belos eyes, and he starts walking slowly towards her and says, Luce, didn't you use an ice glyph to get here? Your magic is working. And as he says this, these two antler-like things come out of his head, which was just horrible. So at this point, Hunter has now been completely possessed, which was actually foreshadowed earlier on in the episode when Luce and Hunter were exiting the basement of that abandoned house, because when the camera panned down as they were exiting the basement, Hunter's shadow had the same sort of antler-like things coming out of his head. Luce then suddenly hears Amity and the others calling out to her and Hunter from off in the distance. She then turns back around and is face to face with possessed Hunter, who then says,
I saw you. Glyphs do work here.
You survived.
I did. Thanks again for all the help, Luce. But I don't need you anymore.
He then lunges to attack Luce with his arm. Luce and Flapjack both barely dodge the attack. His arm then goes into the ground, and he suddenly pulls out this vial of Titan's blood, which may have once belonged to Caleb, and might have been what allowed him to travel between worlds, as earlier on Marcia said that Caleb and Evelyn used a secret code to travel between worlds. So this vial of Titan's blood may have been Caleb's last, however he never got to use it, as Belos killed him in the demon realm. Also, the vial stopper looks a bit like Hootie. Now, if only we'd have gotten a full season 3, because there was originally going to be a nonsensical storyline on Hootie's origins had we gotten a full season.
If you could have the opportunity to have a specific storyline played out in season 3, should it have been the length it should have been, what would it be?
Let me think of something else, because my immediate answer is just like more Rain and Ida. We always did. Oh well, that's a spoiler. We did. Actually, there was a kind of, I don't know if this would have been good for the show, but there was a nonsensical storyline and arc for Hootie that we never got to do that kind of showed his true origin. We do end up hinting at it in the finales, just look out for it, it's real subtle.
Haha, thanks Disney. Anyway, Luce then activates an ice glyph which knocks the vial of Titan's blood out of Hunter's hand and causes it to land on the edge of the grassy bank right next to the lake. So then Luce starts slowly walking towards Hunter whilst activating different glyphs in order to get him to step away from the vial, as it also landed right behind him when he dropped it. Luce is also holding back a bit when trying to get him to move back, and of course Belos picks up on this, so he says,
You're not even trying right now. What, afraid you'll hurt him?
In the background, we see the others arrive, and Camilla's like, "Is that Hunter?" However, Gus immediately knows that something's not right with Hunter, so he says something's wrong, and then Belos continues on and says, "See, this is why you're so useful, Luce. You're so desperate to help people, you even helped me meet the Collector." Like, it's not at all surprising that Belos would say something like that, but regardless, him saying that to her when he knows full well just how guilty and ashamed she's been feeling about it over the past few months is just so fucked up. And him also knowing that she was keeping what happened a secret from everyone until she was ready to tell them in her own time, and then just outing her like that when he saw the others come into earshot of their conversation is just doubly fucked up. Like, I hope he dies for good in the 3rd episode. And then upon hearing this, the gang are all really shocked and confused. So then in response to Belos, Luce says, "I didn't mean to, I thought I was doing something good," to which Belos then says, "You did do something good. I thought this one was another lost cause, but because of you, we can finish our work as witch hunters, starting with them." And as he's saying that, the animation suddenly steps up in quality, and we then get this beautifully animated fight scene, which was animated by Tom Barkle, who also animated the Lumity kiss scene.
Because of you, we can finish our work as witch hunters, starting with them!
Hey, Belos, remember me?
Hang tight, Hunter. Hey, watch out!
Also, one of my season 3 theories sort of came true, which was that maybe V would at some point take the opportunity to drain all of the magic from Belos's body, since basilisks eat magic and then Belos would just wither away. So it was cool getting to see V use some of her basilisk powers during that fight scene, even though Belos managed to get most of his magic back from being drained. Flapjack then goes into his staff form and allows Luce to use his powers, so she uses them to get over to Hunter as quickly as possible. She grabs onto him and says, "I know you can hear me, Hunter, fight him off." Belos then throws her off of him, and then Amity uses her magic to stop Luce from landing in the lake. However, when Belos flung her off of him, she dropped Flapjack, and when I saw that, I immediately started panicking. It then cuts back to Flapjack, who goes back into his palisman form, and at first I thought he was going to try and fly away, but instead he flies back towards Hunter and starts furiously pecking at these antler-like things, doing whatever he can to try and rescue Hunter from Belos. But then this happens.
That's right. You wouldn't want me harming your precious palisman, would you? Oh, but then again, I don't care what you want. Goodbye, Evelyn.
Seeing that honestly just broke me, but something that I noticed was that when Belos went to kill Flapjack, he said, "Goodbye, Evelyn." However, when he first saw Flapjack in the episode King's Tide, he instead shouted Caleb. So from those two instances, my theory as to why Belos shouted Caleb when he first saw Flapjack in King's Tide is that most likely Evelyn carved Flapjack as a gift for Caleb, so Flapjack would have originally belonged to Caleb, and then Belos, already not liking the fact that Caleb was starting to change his view on witches, probably saw Evelyn and Flapjack as a threat, but couldn't really do much about it since Caleb was his older brother, and at that time he most likely hadn't figured out the whole glyph thing just yet. However, he would have often seen Flapjack on Caleb's shoulder or just hanging out in close proximity to him, so when he first saw Flapjack in King's Tide, he probably hadn't seen him in hundreds of years, so was obviously shocked. But then the reason that he shouted Caleb was probably because he initially thought that Caleb had somehow come back to life and was nearby, because like I said, he would have probably gotten used to seeing Flapjack always hanging out near Caleb, which would explain why he reacted the way that he did. Now, my theory as to why Belos said goodbye Evelyn, first of all, I think that at some point in the past, Belos already tried to kill Flapjack, hence why Flapjack has a scar on his left eye. However, he was able to escape and then was eventually taken in by the Bat Queen. But the reason why I think Belos tried to kill Flapjack the first time was to try and stop Caleb from associating with witches, especially Evelyn, and as the manipulative person that he is, he probably came up with some scheme to make it look like Evelyn had tried to harm Flapjack, so that then Caleb would turn on her and then go back to thinking that witches are all evil monsters not to be trusted, since Belos knew that Evelyn obviously meant a lot to Caleb, so him framing her and trying to sabotage her and Caleb's relationship would definitely be something that he'd do. And what's even more sickening is that he most likely believed that doing this was an act of heroism for his brother. However, I think that when Belos tried to manipulate Caleb into believing that Evelyn harmed Flapjack, Caleb just knew that Evelyn would never do something like that, let alone to a palisman that she carved as a gift to him. Plus, Caleb probably received loads of tiresome lectures from Belos about how he should go back to hating witches again. So despite feeling incredibly hurt and angry at what Belos did, Caleb somehow also probably felt sorry for his younger brother and so tried to help him. But despite his efforts, Belos just became even more utterly resentful and hateful of Caleb and Evelyn, so much so that he ended up murdering Caleb, and then Evelyn, after finding out what happened to her boyfriend, went and attacked Belos. So when Belos got the opportunity to harm Flapjack again, he would have seen it as a chance to get rid of what remains of Evelyn's influence, the influence that he thinks brainwashed and ruined Caleb and now Hunter, which would explain why he said goodbye Evelyn. He was saying goodbye to the last bit of influence that Evelyn left behind, which was in Flapjack, the palisman that she created, who then went on to look after Caleb and now Hunter. water. So anyway, Flapjack just about manages to escape from Belos and flies over to where Luce is kneeling. She reaches out to him and he lands in the palm of her hands, clearly very hurt from what Belos just did to him, since he starts breathing really heavily and the magic that's stored inside of him starts oozing out. We then see Hunter fighting back against Belos, trying to take back control of his own body, which was what helped Flapjack to escape, because when Belos was just about to end Flapjack's life, we see Hunter take back the control for a second, which then caused Belos to let go of Flapjack. He then punches himself in the face and then falls onto his knees. Hunter has now finally gained back most of the control. He then starts slowly walking towards the water, and as he's walking, he says,
You know what I'd like, Belos? I'd like to leave the Emperor's Coven and never step foot in that throne room again. I'd like to study wild magic and learn how to carve palisman. I'd like to attend Hexside as a regular student and play fire derby with my friends. But most of all, I'd like to make sure you never hurt anyone again!
That scene honestly made me love Hunter's character development even more than I already did. Like at the beginning of season 2, he was doing anything he could to help Belos get what he wanted, and now at the beginning of season 3, he's doing anything he can to make sure that Belos doesn't get what he wants. And I really hope that in the final episode, Hunter will be the one that gets to end Belos for good. Right after Hunter throws the vial of Titan's blood into the water, Belos regains control again and dives into the water to retrieve it. He gets it, but then starts drowning. After a few seconds, Camilla goes to rescue Hunter, whilst the others anxiously wait to see what happens next. After a few agonizing seconds, she finally resurfaces with an unconscious Hunter. She brings him back towards the land, and the others rush over to help her get him out of the water. As soon as they get him safely out of the water, Belos suddenly leaves Hunter's body, and as a result of the possession, Hunter now has more scars. Belos then reforms back into that hideous monster form and says, Caleb, you would stab me in the back, to which Luce angrily says, you did it to him first. And like, he didn't even bother to address Hunter by his name. Instead, he calls him Caleb. So that just shows that he never saw Hunter as an individual with his own dreams, hopes, and opinions, but rather as a clone that can just be disposed of. Belos then turns round and smashes the vial up against the big stone arc that's in the center of the graveyard, and the Titan's blood starts forming the portal back to the demon realm. He then turns around and says, this is for the good of your souls, you'll thank me later, and then walks backwards into the portal, which for some reason just made me laugh. Like, he does this really slow dramatic walk, and for what? Like, we get it, you're evil and creepy. After Belos disappears into the portal, Camilla's just in absolute shock and says, that's the Belos you've been fighting this whole time, because obviously up until this point she's only been able to go off of what the others have told her about Belos, and so she's probably never really been able to get a 100% full idea or concept of what fighting someone like Belos would actually be like, especially since all the magic stuff is still pretty new to her. Willow then goes, guys, Hunter isn't moving, so Camilla orders V to call an ambulance, and Willow asks, would they know about possession? And then Luce says, or Grimwalkers, so she just accidentally told everyone Hunter's secret, and Camilla's like, possession? And then Willow goes, Grimwalkers. And whilst they're freaking out about possession and Grimwalkers, for the entire time Gus doesn't look surprised at all, so I think it's safe to say that he definitely already knows about Hunter being a Grimwalker. But then Flapjack leaves the little bag that Luce is wearing around her waist and goes and sits on Hunter's chest, cuddles up to him one last time, and then lets his magic absorb into Hunter's body. Pain. That is one word to describe that scene. However, it was amazing of Flapjack to sacrifice himself for Hunter. So when Flapjack disappears, Hunter starts to wake up, and the first thing that I noticed was that his eye colour changed from dark magenta to brown, so he now has the same eye colour as Caleb. And at this point, I started wondering if Flapjack was now somehow a part of Hunter, and if so, could he now do magic without his staff because of that? The first thing Hunter says when he wakes up is, hey guys, is everyone else okay? And Gus goes, actually Flapjack, but then Hunter cuts him off by saying, don't, I already know. So then Camilla starts comforting Hunter and making sure he's okay. Meanwhile, Luce starts walking away towards the portal. But then Amity says to her, what did Belos mean when he said you helped him meet the Collector? That was a lie, right? And Luce goes, no, it was true, and then goes on to explain what happened.
If it weren't for me, the Day of Unity would have never happened. There was this time pool, and I met him. I met him when he was still just Philip, and I taught him the light spell. I introduced him to the Collector. I set everything in motion. I'm sorry, everyone.
And then Amity asks, why did you keep all that a secret? To which Luce says, I was scared. I thought you'd all hate me for it, which is why I've made a decision.
I think it'd be in everyone's best interest if I
took your mama to the demon realm.
What?
Like, oh my god, when Camilla said that, I got so hyped because that was also another one of my theories that I had for season 3, which ended up somehow becoming canon. So that was pretty cool to see. And then Amity says to her, I couldn't hate you. The fact that you still stand up for us means enough to me. And then Camilla's like, now that I've seen what you're up against, there's no way that I'm letting you go back alone. It's our duty to help your friends reunite with their families. Hunter joins in and says, you were tricked. That's what Belos does. He tricks people. However, if it wasn't for you, then it would have been someone else, and then there'd be no one left to fight back. So what he's essentially saying to her is to not keep blaming herself for what she did, because Belos manipulated her, and that's what he likes to do to people. And if it had been someone else who was tricked, then they might have been less likely to make it, because if it wasn't Luce, then they might not have had the same amount of perseverance and determination as she has. So they may have given up earlier on, and also may not have even been able to pick themselves up again after they gave up, which is what we're seeing Luce gradually start to do here. And then Hunter says,
So let's do that. Let's fight back. Please? For Flapjack?
For Flapjack.
So if you made it this far in the video, first of all, thank you so much for watching, and second of all, could you comment for Flapjack? This was honestly such an emotional roller coaster of an episode. The portal starts to fade a bit, so they start to head in. Hunter is the first one to go through the portal. He hesitates for a few seconds, takes a deep breath, says time to go home, Flap, and then walks through, which is really sad, but at least Flapjack will get to live on through Hunter. Also, was anyone else slightly concerned that he was the first one to go through the portal and nobody immediately followed after him? Because Belos walked through it not that long ago, so he could just be waiting on the other side, getting ready to attack them once they arrive in the demon realm. Gus and Willow then walk through the portal, and then Amity says to Luce,
Luce, I know things are scary, and I don't know what the future holds, but it would be so cool if you were a part of that.
Like, that was such a fucking wholesome moment, especially because what she says to Luce directly parallels to what Luce said to her when she asked her out, back in the episode Knock Knock Knocking on Hootie's Door. And then Amity goes on to say, but no more hiding, and Luce is like, yeah, okay, I understand. See you on the other side, I promise. Amity then kisses Luce on the cheek and then heads through the portal. Also, all of that discourse about Amity's side profile was a bit weird, and to be honest, a lot of the jokes and edits about her chin got old pretty quickly. Plus, it kind of shows how toxic people can be when someone or a character doesn't fit their ideal beauty standards, or when a character or someone stops fitting into their ideal beauty standards. Anyway, V then goes up to Camilla and gives her Luce's red baseball bat and says, here, you'll probably need this. Camilla taking the red bat to use as a weapon in the demon realm was actually another season 3 theory that I had. Camilla then says to V, well, aren't you going to be coming with us? And V's like, nah, I don't think I'm ready. Besides, someone's going to have to cover for you whilst you're gone. And then she shapeshifts into Camilla, so it's good that she'll be able to transform into Camilla or Luce whilst they're gone, so it won't raise too much suspicion. Camilla then tells V what to say to the staff at her vet clinic, gives her a hug and thanks her, which was super wholesome. She then walks up towards the portal where Luce is waiting and then asks her, are you ready? To which Luce is like, are you? I'm not sure what we're going to see on the other side. And then Camilla responds that we don't want to leave unprepared and points towards Luce's Azura hat that she dropped earlier on. And oh my god, when that happened, I was just like,
Everything's come full circle, baby.
And as Luce goes to put on the hat, Camilla says,
A good witch always has to have her hat.
and then hand in hand, Camilla and Luce head through the portal, which then slowly fades away. V then starts walking away from the portal, and it then slowly pans up towards the sky. We then hear her say,
Shoot, Camila still has the car keys.
The end credits then start rolling. And so that was thanks to them. Overall, I really enjoyed this episode. And I also hope this video wasn't too confusing, since I'm pretty new to making video essays. And to be honest, I don't really know how to analyze and review a piece of media in depth very well. So that's why parts of this video may have been a bit inconsistent at times. And also why it was more like me talking through each scene of the episode rather than analyzing or reviewing it. Let me know what you thought of thanks to them in the comments, and follow my Instagram. Goodbye.
Like it's fish paw, just sound like you need an ad for Rick Ross. YMMD on my next purchase might